Climate change is an undeniable reality. The entire world is suffering the consequences of increasingly frequent and intense weather events. These events, such as storms and hurricanes, are even more challenging for geographically isolated countries. Small island developing states, where exposure to natural hazards and vulnerabilities are significantly high, can be further impacted by changes in climate, as the supply of goods rely predominantly on air and maritime transportation. Cape Verde is one of those vulnerable island states, where additionally to weather events, earthquakes, and volcanic activity demand for comprehensive approach to promote resilience through policy and investment planning. Located on the crossroads of mid-Atlantic air and sea lanes, its economy heavily depends on goods that arrive daily by air and sea, mostly from Europe and Africa. Due to the island's volcanic formation, and therefore limited natural resources, agricultural products, fuel, and other goods arrive daily in Cape Verde's ports and airports, making the nation's supply chain vulnerable to weather conditions and climate change. To support the national government, the World Bank has developed a project to help improve the country's supply chain resilience against extreme weather events. The project was designed with three components in mind: supply chain modeling, disaster resilience modeling, and serious gameplay. The supply chain model comprises an agent-based simulation model designed specifically to reproduce the freight flows traveling in and out of Cape Verde, as well as among the islands. It simulates the flow of goods by air and sea, considering real data on routes, types of vessels, capacity, and frequency. It also uses information on warehouses, ports, and airports. The supply chain model is also very dynamic, allowing users to evaluate the impacts of disruptive events in any of the elements of the supply chain. Users can monitor the inventory levels for individual goods as a measure of effectiveness. But how the extreme events can influence the supply chain in Cape Verde, and therefore affect people's well-being and the local economy. To tackle this question, a disaster resilience model was developed using data from historic events. By creating disaster scenarios, it is possible to simulate how individual islands can be affected over time, the duration and the intensity of the disruptive event, and ultimately the impact in the national supply chain. The disaster resilience model also considers the allocation of financial resources, aiming at improving resilience in each supply chain component. Different budget allocations can be simulated, in the search for an optimal resource allocation that improves the supply chain resilience against expected disaster scenarios. With a purpose to give government officials with applied research products, the project wrapped up the analytical modeling with the development of a serious game simulation. Designed to foster debate and support decision-making on an evidence-based environment, game players are required to coordinate resource allocation decisions in light of developing disaster situations and development opportunities for social welfare in the economy. Using serious gameplay, the project team is able to collect data and personal sensitivity information in the dynamic and complex scenario of resilience planning. The modeling and game simulation package creates the necessary environment for expert subjects to understand the intrinsic uncertainties related to disaster prevention planning. Through a better understanding of how collaboration in public budget allocation develops, and the scientific assessment of transport asset exposure to natural hazards, the World Bank can be better positioned to offer support to government officials in the complex task to promote resilience in the usual resource-constrained environment that the public sector operates. The methodology developed can be adapted and implemented in other countries and other natural hazard scenarios. It is expected that future developments will further empower both the World Bank and client countries to effectively and efficiently reach the development goals in light of growing climate risks.